All right. Hussam is there somewhere. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You follow me at 5 Reasons Sports and at Ethan J. Skolnick. Debut here on the stream. I'll let Hussam catch up here. Michael Quirk, he's joining us from Atlanta. You can follow him at, I believe I got this correctly, SJB. Michael, obviously you can follow Hussam at Hussam Patel. I'm going to let Hussam take over here in a second. Dolphins win 24-17. That's now 3 straight wins. 4-7 on the season. Tua's numbers today: 27 of 33, 273, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. They held. Flacco threw for nearly 300 yards. Late field goal after the Dolphins tacked on a field goal, and again the Dolphins go to 4-7 with 3 sort of winnable games left on the schedule. And we want to take your comments today, Hussam. I'm going to turn it over to you now. Just sort of your general thoughts about a game that was not, again, particularly attractive to watch, but they keep winning. What do you make of it?
Well, as they said it last couple of weeks, and Mike Gesicki really on top of it, really, put it out there. You win one game, then you win another game, and then another game, and you have a winning streak. You lose one game, and then another, and then another. That's a losing streak. Right now, with 3 straight wins, the Miami Dolphins have a winning streak. And all you need in the NFL is momentum. Now, these are the lowly New York Jets. However, it is a rivalry game. It's always going to be tough playing the Jets, whether it be at home or in the Meadowlands. A lot of people were asking, how come the Dolphins didn't run a lot of cover 0 or blitzes early on, kind of like how they did against the Ravens. The thing is, Mike and Jacob and Ethan, you guys know this. After watching, Joe Flacco of years past, and, again, it's really different, if you're on the scale of if Joe Flacco is elite or not. But he can throw the deep ball pretty well, unlike Lamar Jackson. And I'll say, a win is a win. The Dolphins' defensive game plan was to keep everything in front of them, and they played a lot of cover 2, cover 1, and cover 3 as well. So they can't get beat deep. And the Dolphins' defense doesn't get beat deep that much as a result of the coverage they're playing. But, Michael, I'm going to hand it off to you. What do you think about the Dolphins' performance against the Jets today?
Well, I'm encouraged yet again by the safeties. Whatever we can say about the evaluation of the offensive line, and that's obviously been discussed ad nauseum here on social media and so forth, they've hit on both Holland and Jones. Holland, you saw him potentially going late second into the third, but Dolphins take him at the beginning of the second, and he has potential to be a star in the back end of that secondary, in a secondary that already has 2 highly paid corners. You see Holland come into his own, getting better and better each week, led the team in tackles again. Something I'm really excited to see is Jalen and Tua getting more and more comfortable each week as well. The thing that I'll be excited to see is once that offensive line does get better, whether they address it, whether it's development or whether they address it in the draft or in free agency, is seeing Jalen get unleashed a little bit. Because right now he's running a lot of short routes because can't really get into that second level with the amount.
He had 8 catches, 65 yards, and a rushing touchdown.
And so right now he's being used as almost a slot guy running some gadget routes, when I think his ceiling is closer to what a Tyreek Hill is as opposed to a Hunter Renfrow. And so I'll be excited to see when they can finally unleash Jalen and he can get to that second level and can do what they drafted him to do. But it is encouraging to see them get more and more comfortable together.
Well,
and
to
Jacob,
that point, go ahead. Go ahead, Hussam.
Yeah, and Jacob, what did you see from Tua Tagovailoa and the defense today?
I saw a lot of potential from Tua. I also saw a lot of not so great. The one interception he had early on, I thought that was not a great decision. You got to be smart in those scenarios, because what ended up happening was the Jets got momentum and they ultimately went down and scored that drive. And you can't let that happen, especially if you're playing the Jets like that, because the Jets cannot get that kind of momentum.
To that point, and you mentioned it, Michael, about Waddle, and we talk about Holland. 2 of their most reliable players now are players that they drafted this year. And we talk a lot about the draft the previous year and how they haven't gotten anything out of Noah, which I don't think anybody can dispute, or Austin Jackson now having to play at a different position. They clearly missed on that draft. Obviously, with Tua, the jury is still sort of out in terms of whether he's the long-term answer. But this year, you look at Waddle. I didn't see Phillips flash a whole bunch today, but you look at Waddle and you look at Holland. they did hit on those two, and now I think it's a question of putting them in the best position to succeed. Waddle didn't have a lot of yards per catch today, but I actually thought one of the critical plays of the game was the timing route between him and Tua that picked up a first down in the fourth quarter. Like, that's the kind of play that they have to have. Like, I'm okay with Waddle not having 130 yards receiving if he's a guy that you can trust to connect with Tua in those situations. My biggest issues today were I don't know what was going on at the end of the first half. And this is just a consistent – there's two things that keep cropping up with this team, okay? And besides the fact that Godsey seems surprised when they actually hit a deep ball. It's like, oh, my God, we can do that. But the two things that kind of crop up are, one, they always have better results on the first drive of the game than they do after that in the first half. And to me, that speaks to a lack of ability for the offensive coaching staff to improvise. It's just like they're fine on the script. Once they get past the script, you're screwed. And then again, they just that almost cost them again in this game. What happened at the end of the half? Like, yes, Sanders misses a field goal, but you were basically playing for a field goal there again. Like, there's no attack mode at the end of the half. And then that throw that Tua makes with 8 seconds left, I forgot who it was. It was Smythe. I forgot who it was on the sideline. Like, what is the purpose of that? First thing, it wasn't a good throw, okay, because it was behind him, so he couldn't go anywhere with it. What is the purpose of that? Picking up an extra 4 yards for a field goal that should have been – I know he missed it, but that should be in – they should have been in Jason Sanders' range anyway, right? So I still have major issues with the offensive coaching staff on this team. I don't think they're putting Tua in the best position. And as Jacob mentioned, Tua always has that one throw. It's like there's one throw you come out at the end of the game and you're like, what? Now, he's not the only quarterback who has that, but he has that one throw. And he does – going forward, I always excuse him because I'm a supporter of – he's got to clean that up because it usually is one of those, what the hell was he thinking? Whereas he seems to manage the rest of the game pretty well.
And then that's the thing too, Ethan, just that one throw or one bad play is overtly criticized based on the context of this quarterback situation in Miami. Not to mention, though, you're looking at this offensive scheme and this play call, and you're wondering if the Dolphins are able to go guns blazing in those first or second scripted drives. Why can't they adjust on the fly and do that? And not only that, but the goal line packages, the end zone play calls are just so conservative where they're settling for field goals. They want to put all the pressure on their defense to perform because even though the defense is that strong suit, but you're not going to win games if you don't score in the end zone. And that's what's lacking with this offense right now, not only with the deep shots, but either A, they don't trust Tua in the red zone, B, they can't, they don't trust that offensive line to hold up and have, the wide receivers run, better routes or creative routes where Tua is able to maneuver in the pocket and give it. And, the running game, even though they went over 100 yards, it just wasn't there. They had to really use the wildcat motions, jet sweeps as well. So there's still a lot of building blocks that this Dolphins offense needs to work on this late in the season. But Michael, what were some of the positives out of Tua in this offense?
Tua, other than that egregious throw, and like y'all said, not only does he seem to have one of those per game, but that also gets extrapolated on social media of this is why Tua is not the answer. But right. It's not indicative of his performance. He just really needs to eliminate that one or two awful throws. As he got going, that one throw to Jalen Waddle along the sidelines for a first down on, I believe, a 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5 was an incredible throw.
Yes.
Timed it perfectly, perfect touch on it.
It was very layered, too. It was very layered. And that's the thing, too, Michael. A lot of people critique Tua's base, his footwork, and the way he throws his passes. They're not like rocket passes. The thing with quarterback is you can't always rocket arm a pass. You need to layer it. You need to put it into that window where only your wide receiver can catch it. And that's where a lot of fans don't understand that, they look at Herbert, they look at Mahomes, and they're throwing it with such velocity and such speed. You got to understand, these guys have different throwing motions compared to Tua Tagovailoa, and they layer their passes very differently. Every quarterback is completely different.
You know what I really love that Tua did was twice on both of the touchdowns, he stepped up in the pocket. on that one where he was kind of drifting back. He had 4 Jets converging on him, and he still delivered an accurate pass right to Myles Gaskin to where he could slip into the end zone. And on that deep pass to Hollins, the pocket collapsed, but he saw where he could step up and make that throw. And I think that was a nice thing to see in his development, is a lot of times he will settle underneath just because he has to. And of course, it is a big jump going from college to the NFL, and he doesn't have that many games under his belt. I know it's his second year, but he doesn't have that many games under his belt. Stepping up, looking down the field, and finding Hollins there with an accurate deep pass, you really love to see that moving forward.
Jacob, I want to run to you on this and then cycle it back. You look at his overall performance, again, 27 of 33, which is extremely accurate. We talk about kind of the checkdowns.
Over 80% completion percentage.
Yeah, which I think some of the checkdowns are kind of forced, as we talk about. But my question is, other than Waddle and Gesicki, who is he? That's my thing about, who is he going to trust in these situations? Who do you want to force the ball to where you think a play is going to be made? Albert Wilson made one play today. I feel like that's 3 for the whole season. Preston nearly made a play on the gadget play near the goal line. As Hussam mentioned, they did try to get creative near the goal line at times today because it worked with the Waddle sweep, and it almost worked when they had a flea flicker too. It feels like they have to get creative near the goal line because they have no running game. Gaskin puts up yards, but you're not going to get yards within the 15 with him. They don't have a back to go to. Who else? Who else would you trust, Jacob? I guess if not Waddle and Gesicki. It seems like that's all he has.
Right, and that's just the limitation of what happened with Miami with Waddle, or not Waddle, with Fuller and with Devontae Parker, because those 2 guys need to be with this team right now. Tua at the beginning of the season, it looked like Tua was going to have the dream receiving core, and we're back to having Mac Hollins catching touchdown passes, which is fine because Mac Hollins' deep throw by Tua was a great throw. People were saying it was underthrown. I think it was a great throw. But in terms of weapons, you have Gesicki, you have Waddle, and like you said, Ethan, you have Albert Wilson once in a while. But Tua needs more weapons, and that's just what it is. You got to make them. You got to make them look better. And right now it's Gesicki and Waddle, and occasionally Mac Hollins.
Yeah, and to that point, Hussam, we're not anticipating seeing Fuller the rest of the season. I don't know why anybody would at this stage. He's made $2.5 million per catch. It's pretty good work if you can get it. I don't see any reason why he would rush back. And obviously with Parker, it was supposed to be 3 games. Where are we at it with that, by the way? Was this the 3rd game or the 2nd game? I believe
this was the 3rd game, and there was a report out there. And I caught flack at it here at 5 Reasons Sports saying that the Dolphins needed to trade Devontae Parker for some type of assets because he couldn't get healthy and get on the field. And then there were a little bit of murmurs about DVP being the guy on the team that was contemplating retirement. He's had his soft tissue injuries as well. He can't get on the field properly. And that's where the trade piece comes in. Maybe a fresh start is what he needs somewhere outside of Miami, because that's all he's known. But the big factor is, especially in this offense, is play calling and coaching. They can't figure out what to do with this offensive line. And I wrote about it at the ATB Network, where Liam Eichenberg, he's one of the most technically gifted offensive linemen the Dolphins have drafted outside of Laramie Tunsil, and he's the one struggling the most right now. Before this game, he's had over 44 pressures and leads the league in sacks given up. Now, he's a young guy, started at right tackle, at left guard, at left tackle, and it's been just a continuous movement along for him. He hasn't really honed in on a position where he can really get better at it. Now, his former coach at Notre Dame, Brian Kelly, said that, he's not built – let me rephrase that. He would – be better as a right tackle compared to a left tackle in the NFL. The thing is, when edge rushers, line up, the best ones usually go up against the left tackles, because the generational franchise left tackles, they have longer arms, about 34 to 35 inch arms. Liam Eichenberg has 33 and 2/8 arms. He's also a little bit slow-footed, but he's technically sound. They project him to be more so of an inside guard or a right tackle, but he's being put in this position for left tackle because Austin Jackson can't be that franchise left tackle that the Dolphins need him to be.
But is it the right tackle ultimately? I mean, if we're talking about protecting to his blind side into the future, I mean, then playing your best guy at right tackle. See, I feel like today they did a better job. As much as we criticize the coaching staff, and again, the
No
end of the half,
sacks.
no
No
sacks.
sacks.
They did a better job because I feel like, guys, they schemed around it a little bit better today. Like, it did feel like, for the most part, that the plan was for Tua to get the ball out quickly and not have to deal with the fact, again, that they have no real consistent running game, even though Gaskin, I think, averaged 3.9 today, which is pretty good for him this season. And they were able, Jacob, they were able to kind of scheme around it, it felt like, except for there are times that they don't. Like, they got bailed out at the end of the game by a defensive holding call where they had Tua in a deep drop at the 34-yard line, which is like, if Jason Sanders was still good, which was what you're paying him to be, right?
You pay kickers money, or are you paying kickers money next time, Ethan?
Well, no, but if he was still good, you were in range to go up 10, which essentially puts the game away, and instead you call it Tua takes a 5-step drop instead of a 3-step drop, gets sacked, and again gets bailed out because of a defensive holding call. But I feel like, other than that, they schemed around it better today. Again, I'm not going to celebrate 24 points against the Jets. It's a bad
It was
team.
a little bit better. It was a little bit better.
It was a little
and I
better.
agree with your point. And Jacob, you were talking about, Tua being short of the sticks on third down. That's also, along what the Jets defensive line, as underwhelming as they are, they really put a lot of pressure on this offensive line in third down situations. And him being short of the sticks on third down plays into the route concepts and the progressions he's given under the circumstances of the pressure, which the Jets are able to get into the backfield. I remember it was a 3rd and 5, and he threw it to Jalen Waddle for a 3-yard inside play when Patrick Laird was wide open on the flat. Waddle was his first read there, and there were people criticizing him. Why he could have just thrown to Laird? If you're a quarterback and you only have like 1.5 to 2 seconds, you literally take a look at your first receiver right there, right in front of you, and just throw it. You're facing pressure. You can't just like that. You're already going to get hit. You're going to take that hit, and most likely would be a failed throw too, because the hit's already coming his way, and he did take that hit on that play. So it's just a lot of things working around that offensive line and the play calling, which isn't the best suitable situation for any quarterback in this league to play behind. Michael, you seem to agree with my point here.
Yeah, absolutely. And y'all have hit on it, and I completely agree that not only is the offensive line not setting up Tua to succeed, the biggest thing at this point, of course, if the Dolphins were able to win those Falcons and Jaguars games, we're looking at completely different goals for this season. But right now, if you could say one thing that you want to get out of the season, it's to know whether or not you have your guy. And it's hard to know that when he's not able to do what he does best, not only because of the offensive line, but because of some of the play calling, particularly in the red zone. Tua, he doesn't have the arm of Justin Herbert, and that's fine because most guys don't. It's Mahomes, it's Lamar Jackson, it's Josh Allen, the guys who have those kind of arms. But he's so accurate, and he's so good at anticipation that if you get him in the red zone, give him those safety blankets. You have multiple tight ends who are more than capable, and Matt Collins, another huge target. They're just kind of punting on what he does best in the red zone. I agree that Myles Gaskin is not going to be your guy to line up and say, these are our dudes, those are your dudes, we're going to get these yards. But still, they keep punting to the Wildcat, to Albert Wilson throwing a pass.
Because that's the only way they can run some type of power play. They can get Smythe as a fullback into the block, but they're going to blow it up. I mean, the defensive line of any opposing team that plays the Dolphins knows how egregious this offensive line is in pass protection and run blocking, especially in third and short situations. Almost every single time, without fail, they're running on a 3rd and 2nd and then 3rd and 1 out of shotgun. And they said, you know what? Let's go ahead. Let's give the Wildcat out. Maybe it'll work. maybe it won't. Miles Gaskin, a little bit earlier in the presser, he speaks on what it was like to get those touches. He said it was good for him. The offensive line did their job today. Proud of those guys up front. I know it wasn't what we wanted in the past, but I think we took a right step this week against a very good defensive line. On paper, they're a good defensive line, but on the field,
30
they
seconds.
are a bit underwhelming. They're very, very underwhelming. And I was talking to DJBN Ami about this too. They're really good. Jacob, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, Jets are like 32nd against the rush, and Miami had to come out here and they had to run down their throats essentially because all season long they couldn't get anything going on the run game. And today they came out here with 89 yards. It didn't seem like they had 89 yards on the ground when you were watching the game, but they did in fact hit 89 yards. Gaskin got a rushing touchdown. But there was a lot of tackles for losses behind that backfield too, and it makes you wonder, like, what's the run blocking ability when you gave up when you only have 89 yards instead of 100 yards on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the run game now, it's something that at this stage is just like if you can get a little bit, you're happy with it, and I don't really know how it became that. But it does seem like the expectations on it are so low. Like, yes, Gaskin ended up with 3.9 yards per carry today. He was fine in certain situations. He gashed for a couple runs early in the game. But when you need it, right? When you need it, can you go to it or you need to scheme around it, right? And it just feels like they can't. Other teams in the NFL, and unfortunately, I've never been a draft a running back in the first round guy. Okay, like I wrote columns about that going back to like 2004 and was mocked on the radio. You don't draft a running back. Well, I drafted Ronnie Brown, number 2 overall. Now, that was a bad draft, okay? But, like, they drafted number 2 overall, and I've never really agreed with the premise of taking running back early. But they passed on, like, 7 backs who are excelling in the NFL right now. And at a certain point, it's like, why are you making do with what you have? Well, you're making do and working around it because you didn't address the position properly. So it's like, okay, we're excited if Myles Gaskin ends up with close to 90 yards and 4 yards a carry when Jonathan Taylor is getting you 90 yards in the first quarter. Like, it just – they can't go to it consistently. If they're going to ever give Tua a chance in this place, there has to be something else they go to so it's not like him having to manage every situation to squeeze the last little bit out of it because he never gets a 22-yard run followed by an 8-yard run followed by a 12-yard run to move down the field where then he's in advantageous positions. You got the defense on your heels. You don't know if you're going to run or pass on first down. They know they're passing on first down most likely. The only question is if it's going to be a 3-yard pass or a 5-yard pass. Like that's really where they're at. That has to be addressed this offseason. And if Greer's not going to address it, somebody else needs to. But it can't just be you get down to the 15-yard line and it's what gadget play can we come up with because we don't have a running game. Other teams don't need to do this. Even teams like Baltimore that have literally had 5 running backs injured for the season this year, they still will run. And I know the Dolphins beat them. They still will run guys inside the 10 in a conventional way because their offensive line can actually do something. And the backs they brought in, honestly, off the street are every bit as good as Myles Gaskin or better. So it's just that's the thing is like when people want to judge Tua, I'm frustrated by the one bad play a game. I'm frustrated sometimes that he checks down. But I also don't think he's been given the tools to be able to ever have the defense on its heels. It's always the Dolphins on their heels in those situations. Sorry, that's the way it looks to me.
I do think the Dolphins have tried to give him the tools, but it just hasn't it hasn't been up to expectations what they were thinking of. Again, we go back to the Will Fuller, Devontae Parker stuff, the offensive line not regressing from last season. The defense in the beginning of the season, everyone thought that they would go back to form, but they had their hiccups as well. So, Michael, to this point, what are your expectations of closing out the season? Do you want the Dolphins to rally and potentially fight for a playoff spot, or do you just want to see the young guys develop and grow, even though we take the losses?
I know where I'm going to be at because for the last 15 years, we've been in the same spot where we kind of find ourselves in week 15, week 16 saying, hey, if these 8 things happen, Dolphins sneak in there. And I know I'm going to be convincing myself into that. But for me, the most important thing is if would I rather the Dolphins make the playoffs and lose in the first round and we're still saying, does Tua have it? Are we sure about Tua? Or would I rather miss the playoffs regardless of record, and say, hey, Tua's stepped up. We can see it with our eyes that he's been developing, and that if you can make these changes to what's around him, and we need to stop talking about who we're going to draft in the offensive line spots, whether it's development or evaluation, they've proven time and time again that they do not know how to evaluate and develop young talent. Just go out and spend and get guys who are already good at those spots. You have the cap space. Go out and get guys who have already been through the wars, who already know how to protect a quarterback. But if you can get through this year and say, hey, Tua is the guy moving forward. We have the most important piece. Now it's just time to build around him with the cap space, with still some additional picks. I know, of course, there's the first round kind of mix up there, but that would be the most important thing to me, particularly with Tua. I'm already so encouraged by the safeties, as I mentioned. Jalen Phillips had a sack today, has come along a little bit. As Ethan said, you'd still like to see more flashes of him. He's so uber athletic, and if you can get a dominant pass rusher in this league, that's so incredibly valuable. I love what I've been seeing out of Jalen Waddle. I would love to see Hunter Long at some point. I hope I do one of these days to just know he exists still. But that would be the development, particularly of Tua and the young guys, more important to me.
I was laughing before I go back to you because I feel like you're channeling Lewis, even though he's not here today, because the comment about bringing in offensive linemen who actually know how to play has been like the Louis Sung theme for pretty much every post-game show of the entire year. But it's true. It's true. I mean, that's what has to be. I mean, look, we know what the problems are at this point. I'll just say this. They're not going to make the playoffs, okay? I mean, if you look at the teams ahead of them, there are too many. They've lost too many key AFC games. Look at this. Manny's back there posting comments. They've lost too many AFC games. They're not going to make the playoffs. I think this year is about, at this stage, what Michael talked about. It's this year's rookies continuing to progress, like Holland, like Phillips, like Waddle. It's about keeping Tua healthy. You certainly don't want him getting hurt in the last 6 games. And then you don't know what you have. You don't know if he's healthy going into next season. I think it's finding 2 offensive linemen, 2 that you can trust going into next year, maybe beyond Robert Hunt, who I think most of us would agree is. And I think ultimately it's then making a decision that you're gonna have a different decision maker in the offseason. That's where we're at. And I think the worst thing that can happen to the Dolphins is if they somehow just miss the playoffs and Ross uses as an excuse to keep everything the same. And we have seen, like, let's say they finish 8-9, okay, or something like that. And so he's like, they close strong. I've seen that before, okay? I mean, look, Nick Saban, his first year here in Miami in 2005, if you remember, they started that season 3-7. They won their last 6. There was a feeling that they were on the rise, and they didn't address, I mean, other than changing and trying to get Culpepper in the offseason over Breeze, they didn't address it. We've seen this so many times with Dolphin teams where they think they're closer than they are. This team is not close. They're not close, okay? So I would rather beating the Jets on the road. I understand what you're saying, Sam. Like, anytime you beat the Jets, that's an awful football team. Beating the Jets on the road, like, by a touchdown, to me, the Dolphins are a 6-11 team this year. I'd rather that's what they be. And then you go into the offseason saying, we need to make major changes, then go 8-9, 9-8, and think you're okay. Like, you're not okay. That's my view on it. And
Jacob, what's your viewpoint on this?
I mean, like Ethan said, like 24-17, you expect Miami after doing what they did to the Ravens, you expect them to come out here and play a perfect game here against the Jets, and that's not what it was today. It wasn't it was far from a perfect game. The Jets are arguably the worst team in the league, and you only beat them by a touchdown. I think it was a far from perfect game, and there's a lot of improvements to do. If we play like this against other teams down the road in our schedule, we're not going to win, and that's just what it is. I want to address the defense a little bit because what I saw today was a lot of what I saw last week with the multiple blitz schemes. We were just going after Flacco constantly. I think that worked to an extent. I think Flacco did make some decent throws under pressure when we just sent the house. But ultimately, Miami came back gunning with their 2 blitz boys as their safeties. I like to call them blitz boys because they're like the dynamic duo that just blitz all the time. And I'm not taking away anything from their coverage skills. But what Miami did defensively was basically just blitz the heck out of the Jets.
Of course, and before we go ahead and wrap this up, Ethan, I wanted to go back to your point about the Miami Dolphins willingly trying to stay being mediocre, and I said it in our thread too. It's like these Dolphins are the NBA equivalent. They're the equivalent of the New York Knicks, and you know how the Knicks have been the last 20, 30 seasons plus. Yeah,
At least they've won a
that
playoff.
as
At least I will
Heat
say
reporter.
this: at least they've won a playoff game. Although last year, and I've made this comparison many times. Although last year when they won one playoff game against the Hawks at home, they threw a parade outside the Sbarro over on 7th Avenue. And I don't know what the parade would be like. I don't know, right outside the Walmart for the Dolphins if they won a playoff game right there by the racetrack. They would show South Beach on TV, but it would be by the racetrack gas station in Miami Gardens. Yeah, I don't. They're the Knicks in a lot of ways, but even the Knicks have course corrected a little bit over the past year. They brought in some people who knew what they were doing. They turned it over to an experienced hand in Tom Thibodeau. I don't think they're going anywhere, but they look better than they've looked for the past 15 to 20 years. To me, look, the Dolphins have some nice young players that I think could be build around players. I agree on Holland. Again, I really like Waddle. I'm not so concerned that they gave up the extra pick. You know what? If you get good players, you get good players. Okay, if they're build around players, then they're worth it. You just have to use them correctly. I don't think they've used him correctly, but I think that you can see with him, he knows how to play. He's made a couple major mistakes this year, but for the most part, you trust him at this point. And I think the fact that you can trust him as a rookie, and literally, I don't really want to see Preston Williams, Albert Wilson, Will Fuller on the field.
Well, this
anymore.
wide receiver group is going to change dramatically in the offseason.
But is the tight end group going to change dramatically? Because to me, if you had competent management, Mike Gesicki would have been signed before the season. So what the hell is that? Like that's what I'm saying. Like when you have good players, you keep them.
And that's the thing too. The organizational philosophy about coaching and development needs to change. It's not just about X's and O's, but it's a philosophical thing. I know you want to talk about drafting young guys, draft and develop. But the Miami Dolphins literally just purged all their vets last season, and now they're dealing with the aftermaths of it. You need a nice, healthy balance of young guys and vets, kind of like the Miami Heat. Am I right?
Yeah, but they've never followed the Heat's lead. Like not.
I know how you feel about this.
I mean, I'm looking right now before we go here because I know we all got to go, and I appreciate Michael jumping on for his first stream. Good debut, and thanks Jacob for joining, and Hussam for stepping in here for Lewis. I mean, I'm looking. I mean, they got for their tight ends, they got 10 catches for 106 yards. And I'm just wondering again, like, what was the need to draft Hunter Long there? Like, I just, like, why would you just not re-sign Gesicki? Like, that was not a room that needed to be addressed. Like, did you like the player that much?
A young center guard in Quinn Miners from the Senior Bowl who's doing great in Denver.
Correct, or a young back, or somebody. Like, what is the? I just don't understand what the. I don't get it. Like the tight end position was not a problem. Like why are you drafting into
the future development and having insurance?
No, it's because they didn't want to pay Mike Gesicki. That's what it was. Okay, okay, and that philosophy of losing good players because you think you can replace them in the draft, like you're not good enough at that. You're not Pittsburgh or New England or Baltimore, teams that have done that for years. You're not good enough to do that yet. Like if you have good players, you keep them in your rooms. Like, that's what you do. And I think when Dolphin fans see Gesicki walk after this season, and they're going to want to know, like, what the hell was that? Like, and now you haven't seen any of Hunter Long. So, you don't know. I mean, I don't think Smythe or Shaheen are first-team tight ends. So are they projecting Hunter Long to be that? That's my issue with them. It's like they draft so few good players. Like, the ones you have, keep them, build around them, put them in the best position to succeed. And I just don't see them doing that with enough of their players. And I don't know if that's Flores or Greer or what, but that's my frustration. Anyway, I got to dip. Thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, Jacob. Follow Fins_Dynasty on Instagram. Does a great job on there. He's got all the latest stuff there. We're gonna get Michael on more of these streams, maybe a Heat stream, so it'll be a little more celebratory. In the next one, although this was a Dolphin win. And of course, follow Hussam on our website and Hussam Patel. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Joe.